Snow White, retold by StarDreams. In the winter when Snow White was born, the kingdom was covered in a soft layer of snow, wrapping the whole world in a blanket of tranquility and peace. On such a serene, snowy night, the queen gazed out at the falling snowflakes, her heart brimming with joy and anticipation for the new life to come. On a day enveloped in joy and blessings, Snow White was born. As the queen tenderly gazed at her daughter, who had just arrived in this world, she was captivated by the baby's skin, pure as snow, lips red as petals, and a tuft of black hair that might have been inherited from her father, the king. In this moment filled with love and warmth, she whispered to her swaddled treasure, "You are born from the purity of snow, my little princess. I shall name you Snow White." Tragically, Snow White's mother fell ill not long after. The queen, now frail from sickness, called young Snow White to her bedside. Despite her weakened state, her eyes still shone with a mother's love. She tenderly stroked Snow White's hair, and with a trembling voice she said, "My little Snow White, my love and protection will always be with you. Life is full of unknowns and challenges, but remember to be strong and brave, as pure and beautiful as your name." Though Snow White was too young to fully grasp her mother's words, she felt the depth of her mother's love. The queen held Snow White's small hand tightly, as if transferring all her love and hopes to her. Snow White's mother passed away early, and her father remarried a queen of unparalleled beauty, but wicked at heart. The new queen possessed a magic mirror and would ask it daily, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?"
"You are, my queen,"
the mirror would always reply, until one day the mirror's answer changed.
"The fairest in the land is Snow White."
It turned out that Snow White had grown up and become even more beautiful. Envious, the queen resolved to eliminate Snow White. She ordered a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. With a heavy heart, the huntsman led the innocent and naive Snow White deeper into the woods. With each step into the forest, the huntsman felt the weight of his dreadful task. Yet, Snow White was filled with curiosity and gentleness towards everything around her, sharing a unique bond with the forest creatures. When a deer approached gently, Snow White reached out to stroke its head, smiling. "Hello, beautiful deer. Is the forest treating you well?" The deer seemed to reply with its eyes.
"Yes, princess, the forest is our home."
Then she scattered some breadcrumbs for a group of hungry birds, saying softly, "Come, my friends, these are for you." The birds circled her, chirping joyfully, as if thanking her for her generosity and love. As Snow White and the birds sang a beautiful melody together, the huntsman was moved by the harmonious scene. Snow White softly said to the birds, "Your singing is so beautiful, let's bring more joy to this forest." Her voice, tender and melodious, blended with the birds, immersing the entire forest in pure beauty. Faced with such harmony, the huntsman's heart was tumultuous. He bowed his head, took a deep breath, and mustered the courage to reveal the queen's evil plan to Snow White, pleading,
"Princess, please leave this place and stay away from those who wish to harm you."
Snow White tried to suppress the trembling in her heart and ran towards the unknown darkness of the deep forest. Every step felt incredibly heavy. Yet every leaf in the forest, every gust of wind seemed to cheer her on, and the small animals, sensing her anxiety and fear, jumped around her, guiding her forward. Snow White found herself lost in the forest and eventually came upon a small cottage. Everything inside was tiny and exquisitely made, clearly designed for inhabitants, much smaller than average people. In her exploration, Snow White found 7 little beds, each with the name of a dwarf carved into the headboard. She cleverly joined the beds together and, exhausted, fell into a deep sleep on them. It turned out that the cottage was home to 7 dwarfs. When the dwarfs came home that evening and found Snow White, one of them curiously asked,
"Who are you? Why are you sleeping in our beds?"
She shared her story, and the dwarfs, moved by her tale, decided to take her in. She lived happily with the dwarfs until one day the queen learned through her magic mirror that Snow White was still alive. Enraged to discover that Snow White was still alive and as beautiful as ever, the queen decided to take matters into her own hands. She meticulously planned 3 attempts to murder Snow White, each time disguising herself to deceive the innocent princess. The first time, the queen disguised herself as an old woman selling ribbon belts. She knocked on the dwarf's door, and Snow White, out of curiosity, opened it. The old woman showed her ribbon belts, saying, "Look at these beautiful ribbon belts, princess. They will make you even more enchanting." Snow White was attracted by the colorful ribbon belts and agreed to try one on. The queen quickly and skillfully tightened a ribbon belt around Snow White's waist. Fortunately, the dwarfs came home in time, found out what had happened, and hurriedly untied the ribbon belt, saving Snow White. The second time, the queen disguised herself as a kind-hearted comb seller. She came to the dwarf's home with some beautifully decorated combs, convincing Snow White to try one. The comb was poisoned, and Snow White immediately fell down, sinking into a deep coma. The dwarfs once again returned in time, found and removed the poisoned comb, and saved Snow White. Lastly, the queen employed the most cunning means. She disguised herself as a woman, bringing what appeared to be a fresh and delicious apple to the dwarf's home. This time, she presented Snow White with a bright red apple, saying, "This is the sweetest apple in the forest. Take a bite, princess." Snow White, unsuspecting of the seemingly kind woman, took a bite. Unfortunately, the apple was poisoned, and Snow White immediately fell to the ground, seemingly losing the breath of life forever. Each time the queen's plans were cunning and wicked, but fortunately the timely rescues by the dwarfs saved Snow White from death the first 2 times. However, the last time, even when the dwarfs found Snow White again, they could not wake her. Discovering they could not awaken Snow White filled their hearts with deep sorrow. They gathered around the coffin daily, silently praying and hoping for a miracle. Some even tried to find an antidote, but all efforts were in vain.
"We haven't done enough,"
one dwarf said with guilt.
"We did our best."
Another dwarf responded sorrowfully. The dwarfs made her a transparent crystal coffin and placed her inside. Later, a prince came to the forest and saw Snow White sleeping in the crystal coffin. The prince administered first aid to Snow White, and miraculously, Snow White woke up.
"I have awakened you from your long slumber,"
the prince said gently. Snow White opened her eyes and saw the prince. "Who are you?"
"I'm a prince from a distant land. I heard the story of a princess sleeping in the deep forest, so I embarked on a journey, hoping to see this princess."
The prince replied. Snow White was moved by the prince's sincerity and bravery, feeling an unprecedented warmth. "Thank you, brave prince. You have given me a second life." The dwarfs and small animals surrounded them, laughing and cheering, celebrating Snow White's return. Snow White and the prince returned to the kingdom. Their story was as flawless as a fairy tale, and their rule was filled with wisdom and kindness. They led the country into an unprecedented period of prosperity, and the people lived happily ever after. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, and their story was sung in every corner. Their tale tells people that even in the darkest moments, the light of hope can illuminate the path ahead, bringing rebirth.